let's just go down this decision points for the RHT. And I think to save time, but to also give everyone an opportunity to express their views, let's just perhaps have a show of hands of those who would like these particular line items integrated into the draft bill. It'll save us time. I will mention to the committee that you're going to have more than enough time, once we have the draft bill, to discuss any objections or support of any of these things. I think what I'm trying to do is simply get a bill draft together, and everyone's voice will be heard, either for or against, but I just want to quickly see what support is here in this committee on these specific line items. So with that, Director Richards, if we can, let's start at 1A again, and just let's see a show of hands, and we'll just go down the list. If that's, is that good with you, Mr. Co-Chair? Co-Chairman Bear, is that good with you? Okay, good.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The first decision point is whether or not to establish. So is there support to establish a perpetuity fund for the RHT funds?
All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay.
Is there support to deposit 69.5, is there support to deposit 80% of all funds received in the first allocation year and 69.5% for each subsequent allocation year?
Those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Thank you.
Is there support to include enhanced language to signal protections of the fund, explicitly both the federal protections as well as any state protections that you adhere to?
Those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Thank you.
I'm on 1D, and it actually is two parts, so I'll take part number one. Would you like the payout to be 4% per year or some other number, say 5%, 6%, 3%? The baseline is 4%.
So those in favor of the 4%, raise your hand. Opposed? Okay.
The next portion of...
Again, I want to emphasize, this can all be tweaked. We're starting at a base. We're drafting a bill. Okay.
The second item on that decision point is the date by which the corpus is judged. And I believe the Department of Health, in full disclosure, their bill draft had September 1. So two obvious choices would be September 1 or July 1 to align with other funds that the state administers.
Okay, so let's see those hands for September 1. Those for July? Okay.
The next item is whether or not, we believe this to be the case, but to explicitly note that the perpetuity fund retains its own investment earnings. And the Department of Health draft was silent on that point.
Okay. Those in favor of that idea, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay.
The next item is whether or not after the first 10 years, rather than using the annual market value, to use a 5-year average market value.
Those in favor of that idea, raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay.
The next item, I'm on 1G for those reading along, is whether there is support to authorize the 4 initiatives that were included in the Department of Health's application for the perpetuity programs, those being critical access hospital basic services, EMS regionalization, workforce education awards, and physician GME or graduate medical education. And I'll have some subsequent questions after that, but are the 4 categories have the support of the committee?
Those in favor, raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay.
And of those 4 categories, is the committee satisfied with authorizing those categories and directing the Department of Health to develop rules on its own for each of those categories?
Those in favor, raise your hand. Those opposed?
Mr. Chairman, can we just get a little bit more communication on that? real
Absolutely.
quick, please? So, Mr. Richards, could you just kind of go a little bit further into that? So you're just saying giving rulemaking ability to, and I didn't catch it, I'm sorry, was that Department of Health? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the Department of Health would be authorized to make rules as a base for the draft. There are some opportunities where the legislature could impose some minimum standards, and we've listed those, for example, under EMS regionalization, and we were going to take these up individually, but these are examples to provide regionalization safeguards. In the case of workforce education, did the legislature, and you spoke about this yesterday, want to have a set minimum commitment, hypothetically 5 years, in order to benefit from these funds? Same thing for the physician graduate medical education, is service to the state for 10 years, 2 years, 5 years acceptable?
Comment, please.
I just feel like we're painting ourselves into a corner. We're putting the box around things that we probably don't fully understand yet. And I don't like locking us in at this point.
Any other comment? Yes, Ms. Co-Chair.
I think, and we could certainly get some guidance from the Department of Health as we draft this bill in the coming days, but I'd prefer to have as much of this type of work done in the statute, in the green books, rather than in rules making. So just want to add that caveat that the more we can get done now, the better. As far as these limitations, we can always come back as a future legislature and make adjustments in a future statute.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is a question in here about who authorizes changes. I think it's 1J. And I think as long as that is there, it gives us a backdoor to alter things as we learn more. And so that to me is the safeguard. But I'm just one person, and I have, just as a matter of record, I have tried to reach my DC overlord so I'd know how to vote, and I'm hearing nothing. So.
Ms. Co-Chair.
I appreciate my vice chair's comments, not that last one, but the others. But I will say this, that 1J is actually about the funds, and we do need to be specific about the authorization of the funds, who it's going to be. But I think this question is really about, what types of programs will qualify. So when it comes to that, it will be necessary to have rules on how they apply and what the application looks like, all those things. But as much of that as we can possibly put into the statute, I would prefer. And obviously there'll be limitations, but short answer, yes, we can allow the department to make rules, but as much of those rules we can put into statute as possible is what I would prefer.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, Tamara Revley,
Yeah.
legislative staff. I think the reason that this was posed was that the draft we received broadly just described the 4 categories of program, and LSO staff would typically recommend that the legislature do outline some basic safeguards to ensure that the legislature and that the state of Wyoming was expending these funds for a public purpose and was in return getting some kind of a commitment to the state that would benefit the state. And so this was not to be thought of as, can we just put in the bare minimum? This was to be said, can we expand upon the draft that was provided to us to outline these programs a little bit further, to make them a little bit less vague, and then anything that needed to be filled in, like specific application criteria or application dates or what counts as a year of service, those kind of little details would be filled in by rules. But maybe this question was posed a little bit opposite of how it should have been. It's not, can we put in the minimum standards? It's, can we better outline them to at least have some criteria that legal staff usually recommend be in there when we appropriate federal funds for a purpose that's private.
And I think you've heard the comments subsequent, of what we're aiming at. So I think that will be of help. Should we see a show of hands for this? All those in favor?
Can we clarify the vote, exactly what we're voting on.
Down what, could you read it again?
Do we have authorization to include in statute minimum program requirements? That'll be the first question. Authorization to put in minimum program requirements.
So all those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay,
Second policy issue is, would you like us to authorize rulemaking by the Department of Health for the details of those programs?
okay. All those in favor, raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay.
I think I'm okay. Yes, next item is 1H. Do you want to assign the percentage amounts as submitted by the Department of Health for each of those 4 categories? So to remind the committee, critical access hospitals was submitted at 28.3%, EMS at 18.7%, workforce education at 15%, and physician GME at 7.5%. Do you want those in statute, or is that unnecessary?
Thoughts, anyone? Mr. Co-Chair.
I only have one thought that would make this difficult. We have reduced the amount that's going to be available in the first year. I brought up the Kimmer long-term facility yesterday, and I think that that's something that if the timing could be achieved, that may take more than 28% of what we've left. And so I'm not sure we want to, I like the percentages because it gives guidance, but maybe is there a way we can put a relief valve so that they could have some flexibility if they had a large project?
So, of course, a future legislature could come back and amend a percentage if it's set forth in statute, but we could include some language with authority to change the percentages based on certain conditions happening or being met, or certain number of applicants, the fund being exhausted. One initiative is much more popular than the other, or something of that sort.
Okay, Senator Drew.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, yeah, like we would say the goal of this would be the percentages laid out by by the department, and then just by having that term that these are the goals of it, and then you can write in the good old stuff that we usually write in there, but then with changing demands and changes of legislative dictum that we can maneuver those or whatever.
Representative Sherwood.
Thank you. It feels like a little too detailed to have in the bill is my gut, that it doesn't allow the agency flexibility. But I guess I'd like to hear from staff on, if the bill is silent to the percentages, what are the unintended consequences?
Like, I can try to address that. It's not uncommon for different grant and loan programs to say, at least 200 million of the 400 million should be used for these types of projects or should go to these types of entities. So it's not uncommon in statute to put some up to minimums to ensure that all 4 initiatives are being met, but to allow discretion up to that amount. So we could consider that kind of language with flexibility.
Mr. Chairman.
To determine
Chairman.
based on need. And I think it might further be restricted. We'll have to look at how it comes back through the cooperative agreements and through, after the budget's submitted to the federal government, how tied in we are to those exact percentages. And that's not something I don't think I can answer. I think that will be for the Department of Health and to see how those documents come back.
Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, if the amounts changed, I think it would be proper to have somebody in the legislature seeing over that, like management council or whatever we decide.
I think that's a good point. And again, these could be placeholders to get the bill draft. Once we get the bill draft, we can continue to tweak it, ask those specific questions. We just need the shape of an entity. Yes, Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This kind of echoes back to my earlier comments. To me, the important thing is we have the minimum standards for what we're going to accomplish lined out. And then what percentage of what amount of money, that kind of is determined by what does it take to meet those standards. And maybe one comes more easily than another. I just feel like putting percentage numbers in there that are very rigid are gonna start locking us in.
Is there a consensus that we should leave those percentages blank right now and fill them in with, after the bill draft is presented, or do you want those percentages put in now? Mr. Co-Chair, what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I think Senator Guru brought up a great way of dealing with this. You just set forth goals. That way the legislature has a certain expectation and the executive has an expectation. Everybody's on the same page. And then when there's a caveat that leads to changes from that expectation, we can discuss it as Senator Larson brought up, maybe reporting to the management council that there's been a deviation. That would be proper. So I prefer having them in there, but not as a dictatorial percentage that has to be followed, but more as this is the expectation.
Okay. So how does that look? Is that something that we need to, let me see the hands of those folks who feel that that's more of the way we should go. Okay, so Director Richards, you know where we're going on that issue then.
The next item is who should authorize expenditures from the perpetuity fund? So you've agreed to 4% per year. Obviously, those funds won't generate 4% immediately. It'll take some time to invest and reap the proceeds. But technically, you could have the money, 4% could be spent on day one. Or you could say only after, the first year. I think you've selected July 1. Who should have that authority? In the Department of Health's proposal, the Department of Health with an advisory is contemplated. You could have a different structure.
Well, this is, any thoughts, Mr. Co-Chair? Who had their hand up? Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Larson,
I
yes.
I would think an advisory would be a management council.
Yes, who else has any thoughts on that line? Anyone? I guess yes, Representative Pendergraft.
I see the wisdom behind management council, but I also see the wisdom behind those who are maybe a little better informed. And so I would point more towards labor health.
I think that's a valid point. I think that the challenge we may be facing, though, is once we're out of session, we're dealing with 10 months out of the year where I could conceivably see where these decisions on a weekly or monthly basis are occurring. I think one of the reasons, Senator Larson, you were thinking of management council is it has had the history of making decisions within a very quick time frame. But what do other people think? Anyone else? Representative Harrelson, did you have something? Representative Sherwood, did you have a thought?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm comfortable with the department's original suggestion of the decision-making authority being through the Department of Health with the advisory board. We could always tweak who's on the advisory board to include a member of labor health, include a legislative representation. Thank you.
Mr. Co-Chair.
I certainly understand the difficulty that we're running into here. We'd like to ensure that there's legislative oversight. I too would agree with Representative Sherwood that, to a certain extent, advisory committee could be sufficient for smaller awards. But I think if they're going to be large awards, there needs to be some legislative involvement. So maybe we can put I don't want to run into the issue of separation of powers, but I do want to make sure that the legislative branch does have a say in those large appropriations. So maybe we could put a limit for that decision-making for that, the department with its advisory council. And then if it's going to go over that limit, we get the legislature involved.
And what do you think, Mr. Co-Chairman, might be a figure that we might be thinking? Representative Harrelson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. 500,000 is the line that we have currently in the Wildlife Trust Fund. And what it could be is it could be any amount over 500,000 goes to Management Council for their approval, and below that, the board itself. And obviously the board would vet all those projects, but the final say over 500,000 would go to Management Council.
So I tend to like that
Yeah.
idea. I think that's the kind of thing. that
Write it
would,
up, yeah.
Satisfy not only, let me have a hand vote on that. Does everyone understand?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to speak up and jump in here, but I might offer some suggestions on how we've structured similar issues in the past and an issue that hasn't been discussed so far. And I might.
Please.
So that issue is that in addition to separation of powers concerns, which could be raised here, we have a non-delegation concern. So generally, a committee is only an arm or a creature of the legislature. The power of the legislature rests with the legislative bodies themselves, and a committee can only make recommendations. It can't actually exercise legislative authority, such as determining how things are spent. So what we've done in the past with things like the B11 amounts, we've asked for notice with the theory that a special session could be called if something were to go so awry as to amount to the legislature needing to exercise its legislative function and its power over the purse. And we've done that for, I believe, welfare emergencies and large B11s. And so we could create an advisory board and have a legislative member be a liaison. That would provide support. We could also have notice, but we generally try to reserve the actual approval authority to the full legislative body, not an arm of the body.
Well, how would you foresee that on a consistent basis when we're not in session?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, that raises a great question, and that is the limitation of the legislature and its short sessions. And we do know that under separation of powers principles in Wyoming, there's kind of a flexible, pragmatic approach that's used. We give the legislature gives the governor some of its authority to make appropriations during the interim through the B11 process. So, there might be some leeway in the committee trying to reserve some of that authority to the legislative branch, but we generally don't give it to one committee of the legislature.
Well, that's something to think on.
Mr. Chairman, just let me ask a question. And maybe this is going to be for you, Director Johansson, if you want to jump up and maybe take a swing at this ball. As we look at this, so like we look at some of our other funds, like the fund we just referenced when it comes to wildlife, they go through an entire process to apply, to be vetted, to be accepted, and then for allocation of funds to go out to them. Do you anticipate this being a process that might take 3 weeks, 3 months, or is it a situation where you're going to take applications? This is the amount of money coming out of the corpus. We're then going to pick everyone, and then we could run it very much like the trust funds, where it comes before us and we vote on it as a legislature. Is that even a viable option, or is that just going to grind the machine to a halt? Can you talk on that?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Stephen Johansson with the Department of Health. Representative Harrelson, it's a good question, a little bit of yes and no throughout your questions from my perspective. The challenge is with what we've been approved by the federal government in these programs and subsequent budget allocations that we've proposed, we have some uncertainty on the awardees. So if you go one by one, let's just talk about the perpetuity funded programs that we have. Hospital incentive programs for critical access hospitals, EMS incentive programs, and then workforce development. So education awards for CNAs, nurses, et cetera. We don't know at this point what the volume of applicants, either for an RFP or an RFA, request for applications, will be. So the challenge, I totally understand where the committee's going and the oversight that is necessary, and we welcome that. The problem is during that interim period when the legislature is not in session, if we were to say have percentages set in statute and have a process by which the funding that generates our ability to spend those awards is not somehow flexible during that year, and we don't get as many applications from hospitals as an example that we anticipated, we could have a reserve amount of money sitting in that program approved by the feds that we can't change, and therefore risk the state of Wyoming, essentially foregoing that funding out of this award that could be potentially modified in other areas. So yes, we see the mechanics very similar to, Wildlife Trust Fund as an example, where the oversight, to LSO's point that is much more eloquent than mine, is authorizing sort of the broad parameters of this, but there's some amount of flexibility during the interim years when the legislature is not in session, that we have the ability to exercise the spending of those funds within the approved categories. I think that's crucial to the efficient operation of this, but I totally understand this is a lot of money, and we didn't design this program to be Department of Health's just going to get $1 billion and do whatever we want with it, because we have those federal parameters that are fairly locked in through the law, through HR 1, and through the federal administration through CMS. I think clarifying some of these through legislative sideboards is absolutely welcomed, but just being careful about some of those unintended consequences where fast forward to July or August of this calendar year, we would hate to have some of our funding distributed to other states that could be used across EMS or workforce or other categories because we didn't see the volume of participation in one other category, if that makes sense, Representative.
So one of the things that we might consider is the threshold of 500,000 or lower goes to the advisory board. With regard to building a draft bill, we could put that in there. And then I think maybe over the next 48 hours, let's see if we can find a mechanism that we could agree with to still give legislative oversight, but something that we haven't quite thought of yet. Yes, Mr. Co-Chair.
We don't need to vote on this, but here's something for people to chew on in the meantime, an idea. And that would be of the 4% that's going to be available each year, we pick a percentage that if it's going to go to one project, that it has to be approved by the full legislature. So if you've got a big project, it's going to need to go through the legislature if it's going to take a big chunk of this money. Maybe it's 10% of the total funds available that year. We can pick a percentage, but if you're going to put all the money into one project, then it needs to go before the legislature.
And maybe we can have that within the bill draft. We can leave the percentage out and come back to it when we have a fuller discussion on the bill. So I think you have, Director Richards, a general idea of what where we're going. And can I see the hands of those who feel comfortable going in that direction and waiting to see the final draft then? Okay, so we're giving you some direction to go on that, and we'll go from there.
I think you've answered 1K in hindsight. I don't think that's necessary. 1M is, this again was, I believe, included. It was included in the department's draft, an expectation that the perpetuity fund be invested in equities and alternatives. I do want to make a point on this. By including 1M, the threshold for passage of that provision becomes 2/3 rather than a simple majority on the floors.
Okay. Right. So let me see the show of hands of those who are in favor of this. Okay. Again, it's a draft. Yes.
I just would say that when we're presenting this on the floor and making the argument, trying to get 2/3, this lengthens the time because we will have a higher rate of return. So this lengthens the time and the amount of funds over time that will be available.
Okay.
So everything in category 1 is for the perpetuity fund. Now we are shifting to the bottom half of the department's matrix presented yesterday. They title this time-limited infrastructure and pilot projects. So this is kind of the other 20% in that first year, and in future years, other 30%. And they have outlined a variety of programs and projects which their application contemplated. Two questions here. Number one, I had some desire to return to employment tomorrow, so I have struck one of those that does not appear to have support of the committee. But I'm guessing on that point. Are those are those programs desired to be included as potential expenditure options?
Representative Pendergraph first, and then anyone else?
Can I ask a couple questions?
Yes. I
Thank
think-
you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like a definition of integrated primary care. I don't know what that is. Good. And then I have a couple others I would do.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Angelos, Franz Fuchs, Deputy Director, Department of Health. The Integrated Primary Care Initiative is primarily targeting the expansion of federally qualified health centers around the state. So really trying to provide time-limited grants for them to expand the number of sites and the depth of services they pursue with the idea of, or so the depth of service they provide with the idea of really incentivizing primary care that's integrated with behavioral health. So having that on site, as well as an emphasis on obstetric care. What's nice about federally qualified health centers is that they have federal tort claims protection. So that's one way to kind of have some malpractice coverage if that provider is coming out of that FQHC. So the idea is to really have a 5-year effort where we really try to expand the number of sites, FQHCs around the state.
Continue, please.
So knowing that our malpractice rates are part of the issue why we have a maternity drought, this might be beneficial to that.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if I may, Representative Angelos, another important facet of this program is, as you recall, our application, one of our main priorities was on sustainability. And I believe Representative Haraldson brought this up this morning, that we're trying to avoid programs that we stand up or expand that after a 5-year period, you all are left with a now what kind of decision. Federally qualified health centers in their reimbursement structure from their payers are already a favorable and sustainable model. So we chose that for primary care expansion because with these time-limited grants to sort of expand their footprint on centers that already have plans or would like to go into other towns or communities and establish this type of service. When they do, they already have and are eligible for a favorable financial model going forward. So it wouldn't require additional state subsidies beyond that timeframe.
Please continue.
Thank you. Sorry to get into the weeds on this, but I think it's important. So the reason why we don't have any federally qualified centers currently is because it would take state funds to help, like to bridge that. I'm just wondering why we don't have those now and why we're looking at this now when we've had this issue for years and now this is coming up. I would just like some answers to that.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Angelos, it's a great question. We do have federally qualified health centers around the state benefiting from the financial and reimbursement models that they do. This would allow kind of on the backs of that system in some of the rural and frontier areas that we visited and heard from, with the priority from some of the public being, additional primary care docs available, using that sort of model to when it makes sense to let those federally qualified health centers expand their reach through these time-limited grants and then rely on that reimbursement model going forward. So it's not to say we don't have that service already. This would just be leveraging it a little bit more because of the advent of these funds through the Big Beautiful Bill.
Okay, more? Anything else? Representative? Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Just need to be real clear here. My understanding is that as you're looking to expand this integrated primary care, it can't be through capital construction. That'd be a correct statement. So could it be used for, let's say you have an integrated primary care facility and they want to expand into another community, can it be used for a lease in that other community?
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Barrett, another great question. So generally in this program, in the Rural Health Transformation Program, there are strict parameters and even prohibitions on capital construction for new facilities. Where this could have some retrofitting or construction elements is on repurposing already existing clinic space to meet that federally qualified health center requirement. And we've worked with the Primary Care Association and physicians across the state to initially design some of these concepts. But yes, you're generally speaking, we have avoided capital construction in terms of new facilities, new buildings across the board in this application.
Okay, Representative Pendergraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm speaking strictly for myself at this point. We've already stricken catastrophic major medical plan. I would also strike exercise and diet promotion for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that this has been done through federal funding to the tune of, and Mr. Fuchs, this might be what you were referring to the tune of $1 million. And several times I asked the Department of Health for any sort of evidence, tangible evidence that what the return on that investment is, and no one was ever able to give anything. I think it's very dubious that, frankly, people care much. And I think especially in Wyoming, people don't like the nanny state. We don't like seatbelt laws. We don't like helmet laws. We don't like people telling us what to do. And I just feel like for something that is dubious to be able to even measure the success of it, I would rather not waste a dime on it.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Pendergraft, your comments are well taken. Just a bit of gentle pushback on how this was developed and some of the opportunities we see. This was also strongly encouraged by the Trump administration through the Make America Healthy Again initiative and a pretty heavy focus on the application guidance to all states. Your point about traditional efforts in this area through public health across the country are again well taken, with how smaller amounts of funds have been used to promote healthy lifestyles, and to your point, maybe some limited evidence of efficacy. But I would just argue that the absence of evidence is not always the evidence of absence, or whatever the term is. But I think with what Wyoming is strong in and why we included this, and I think the federal government agreed in their approval, is we are rich in a few things many things in this state. One of those is our outdoor space, our outdoor lifestyles. And we really see some opportunities here to get creative with healthy lifestyle promotion through our outdoor recreation, hunting, fishing, hiking, et cetera, to maybe incentivize the public or offer some fun programs to do those things. In addition, on the infrastructure side, we heard a lot in the development of this through our public engagement that, for example, in certain parts of the state that are very cold and icy during the winter, a senior center, for example, doesn't always have the space for the elderly in the community to get moving and exercise and that type of thing. And we would be able to offer, again, some time-limited grants to retrofit some space, in other seasons, walking paths, things like that, that could be some community infrastructure that promotes that type of lifestyle. But again, I offer those comments not as a disagreement. I understand where you're coming from, but that I certainly do see some rich opportunities here to do that kind of public health work for our population in where Wyoming's strengths are in a different and creative way.
Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Director, you're not suggesting that you would send people out into bear country, are you?
So,
Mr. Chairman, not without insurance.
yes, a follow-up.
Following up on that, I would just want to make sure you don't want more people out there crowding into my hunting areas. I got to get this straight. No, thank you for hearing all of you for putting up with my cantankerousness.
My suggestion is, why don't we go with this list? And if anyone wishes to remove any of these, once we get the draft, I don't think it would be difficult to do that. So,
Accepting catastrophic care.
correct. That's already. So all those in favor of the current list to be put in the draft, raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay. Continue.
Mr. Chairman, based upon your reactions to the perpetuity funds, I might suggest, is there any opposition to mirroring the minimum description and then authorization for the department to establish rules as necessary on these?
All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay.
And then item 2C, I don't think we have discussed, should these funds be annually approved and appropriated? And maybe that question upon reflection is not relevant, quite frankly. I think
That's what I thought as well, but
item 2D, you have touched on already with the perpetuity fund.
right.
And I think the consensus was goals, not strict percentages.
Correct.
Okay, so now we're moving on to the last 8, I believe, and these are generic or general items for the potential bill draft. Should any topics be directed to an interim committee for further study and review?
Who has some thoughts? Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, you made some comments about the interim committee on which 3 of us served. And I just wish that you might share those with the rest of the people here, with the public, about the value of that interim committee and maybe weigh that into this discussion.
Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Pendergraft, if you're referring to the Joint Appropriations Committee subcommittee, absolutely, as I mentioned yesterday and in December, found the discussions, the work useful, valuable, and productive in diving deeply into the department's budget, our functions, learning on both sides of the table for sure. To the question on interim committee assignments with rural health transformation, you might recall from our application, we do need to bring certain topics to interim committees that we essentially committed to the federal government on what they call state policy action items that were part of the scoring of this award. So the SNAP waiver topic, which the governor did direct through executive order, but we know that the legislature is also considering and has considered legislation on that, is certainly or potentially one of those interim topics. Things around licensure of various types of professions to allow full scope of practice type actions on the state policy side was also an incentive in the federal program that we committed to bring to a relevant legislative committee for consideration. And that I think the natural committee there is obviously labor, health, and social services. What am I missing, Franz? Anything else? Scoring. Okay.
Anyone else? Anyone else have a comment on that?
So, Mr. Chairman, that could evolve through the natural interim committee's topic selection and not be included in statute, or occasionally these overarching bills include directives to certain committees on provider licensure or SNAP waivers. It's a policy choice.
Okay. I guess for the purposes of the bill draft, maybe we could be flexible, and then if we want to tighten this up, once we have a draft in front of us, we could certainly amend that. Mr. Co-Chair, what are your thoughts?
I think it would be appropriate, and maybe Director Hibbert can weigh in or Director Richards can weigh in. You know, when the ARPA funds were under our purview, I would imagine that JAC was getting regular updates throughout the interim as well as in session as to, you know, the progress of managing those funds and the just how they're being distributed, what's happening. Just a brief report whenever this committee gets together on that.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. There was a requirement under ARPA that we did a monthly report for the Joint Appropriations Committee. We solved that by putting an online document on the Grants Management Office, the ARPA portal. So it was instantaneous and it was constant. And certainly that met the monthly report. And I don't believe that would be any stretch for us to collaborate and develop and facilitate that. The other thing about it is that we had this very same discussion. It was a long discussion about ARPA redeployment. And in ARPA redeployment, similar to Senator Grew, you put the goals that you wanted us to achieve in that ARPA redeployment, and we did. We followed those goals. Department of Health had goals. So that's the combination of the two things I think that we're more than willing to do. I think it's an expectation. We're already drafting it up. And if you instruct us to do that, great, but you don't have to because we're going to see to it anyway.
Okay. Yes, Director.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just to add to Director Hibber's comment, the federal law and the guidance from the administration already has quarterly reporting requirements in it. Anything more frequent, as Director Hibber mentioned, I don't see as a huge issue to make sure that there's transparent visibility into what's being expended and how that's operating.
And Mr. Chairman, one small caveat or another strength, I suppose, would be a better way of saying it is, not too many years ago, the legislature put in a 10-day waiting period between the time that we author a B11 and the time that we submit it for the governor to sign, and ultimately that it becomes a legal document with the SAO. That's in statute now. We have no reason not to give the opportunity for that 10-day waiting cycle. And we have had B11s that we've drafted that required further conversation with the chairs of the Joint Appropriations Committee and the executive chief executive. So just keep that in mind as well, is that there's already safeguards in place to ensure the opportunity for us to collaborate to where we don't create tension amongst ourselves.
Good point. Okay, so any other comments? You want to go ahead then and should we take a vote on this, or should, all those in favor, please raise your hand on this. Those opposed? Okay, thank you. Next.
The next item is, should any expenditure of rural health transformation funds be prohibited? So you haven't authorized some things, but did you want to
Yes,
prohibit?
Mr. Co-Chair?
Well, Mr. Co-Chair, I certainly would like to see these funds be prohibited from abortion and sex change treatments.
Okay, this may require a number, some votes here. I think that's pretty straightforward. Can I see the hands of those individuals who believe that should be prohibited? Those opposed? Okay, thank you. Mr. Co-Chair, what else? Do you have anything else? Or does anyone have anything else of prohibited use? Okay, well, then, well, we've taken that vote, so let's go on to the next one.
The next item, item number 5, is how much should the legislature appropriate? For example, you could appropriate the first year, just the first 205 million. You could appropriate the second year as well. The Department of Health recommended 2.5 years, or 512.5 million, or the full $605 million. And I think there was some discussion that, for example, at least 2 years worth will be available to the legislature before you meet for the 2027 session. So there might be some wisdom in allowing that money to be accepted and deposited into the perpetuity fund as soon as available.
Anyone have any thoughts on that issue? Do you have a thought on that issue?
I have a question. I guess I'd like to know, if we did 1 year, what would be the restrictions that we run into having to wait until maybe the effort of the supplemental budget or an additional bill to authorize those expenditures? What kind of issues are we creating if we only do 1 year versus 2 years versus 3 years?
Well, I certainly would defer to the Department of Health, but my concern or observation is that next September, October, we will hopefully receive access to another $205 million. And we would potentially be delayed until at least February before any of those funds could be either deposited or expended. The third year, I think, is more flexible because you will be coming back in 2027.
Mr. Kuchar, and then I'm gonna ask the director.
I think this, we kind of touched on this yesterday. This would also prohibit us investing those funds from September through February. Whereas, you know, our intentions thus far has been to try to maximize the returns on these investments to lengthen the time. So I would be opposed to doing anything less than probably 2 years would be the minimum.
Might be good. Director Johansson?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. Fully agree with Mr. Richards on that. That's the downside is we're operating state fiscal year versus federal year. So our subsequent second year award will likely come sometime between September and the end of October of this calendar year. So when we talk about depositing into the perpetuity, you could potentially, if that money were available to us, be losing, you know, between 4 and 6 months of investment opportunity there. I will say that as we talked about earlier this week, there is a check on the department's use because both during the interim period and during subsequent or supplemental sessions, you always have the ability to tweak. So should our award in the second year not be 205 million, if it's more, if it's less, we could certainly work with you, bring you those adjustments, similar to how we do the developmental preschool, ECA, child count, those types of things. So I think the mechanism is there.
Can I ask Director Hibbert, do you have any thoughts on this, perhaps?
Mr. Chairman, I do, and I've got some track record information to share as well. I agree with Don Richards and Stephen Johansson, as we don't want to miss the opportunity to get this invested as soon as possible for the return. How important it is that is with ARPA, we collaborated and Treasurer Meyer helped and arranged that to where we got the investments and we got the flexibility of the type of investments delivered. And we did a cash flow for the expenditure of the ARPA dollars so that we could extend the length of the investments, because the longer term investments you have, the greater return you can expect. Last time I checked, we were just below $50 million on the ARPA fund. So I strongly suggest that you provide the flexibility for the department when they receive the authorization of the federal funds, we capture it, and when we invest it. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess the question is, are there any thoughts on the time? Anyone have any thoughts on a potential? Yes, Senator Larson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'd just like to ask, what's the downside of putting it at 512 and a half?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Let's assume that the federal government comes back and it's 600 rather than the 512. All I'm saying is that after the first 205, then after that, predicated on what's available from the federal government, we have the opportunity to invest. That's what I'm suggesting. I don't want to trap ourselves if the number comes above 512. That's just my thought on it.
Representative Pendergraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was kind of wondering the same thing. Would we be better off to express it another way rather than a dollar amount? To be able to say funds received up until such and such a date in this program would be expendable.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's the least risk adverse aspect that we can go down to make sure that we ensure that opportunity. It's going to be a sizable amount of money that's available for us to do that.
Mr. Co-Chair.
So really, the only funds that we're certain of would be the 210 in year one. So we could put that number, and then the rest would be just language giving the authorization.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that would be the preferred methodology to ensure that the state of Wyoming can take full advantage of that investment income. And naturally, it doesn't hurt to extend that to the next iteration, as we progress, so that we don't have to reconsider that investment aspect.
So Director Richards, do you have a thought on the language that we could, given what the tone of the committee is?
Yes, I think you're actually discussing number 5 and number 6. Building off of Co-Chairman Bear's comments, you could make 205, which is known, and we could take that out to the individual dollar, make that effective immediate, and then add funds received from federal fiscal year 2027 and 2028 to incorporate no matter how much we might get, or funds that other states were unable to expend, perhaps Wyoming could benefit from.
Yeah, I personally like that idea. What am I've seen some heads nod. So let's take a vote. All those in favor of that concept and idea, raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay.
The next policy question is for reporting, and you've kind of touched on this, whether or not you want annual, semi-annual, quarterly reporting.
I think we have touched on it. Representative Sherwood?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to, I think, reiterate that if the feds are requiring quarterly reporting, that we would just mirror that requirement.
Director Richards? Let me ask. Yes, Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would definitely agree with Rep. Sherwood, with the caveat that if we could do that live time reporting that Director Hibbert commented on, that'd be amazing, because that'd give kind of a dashboard effect to it.
So all those in favor of that idea, raise your hands. Those opposed? Good. Yes, Representative Hyden. Did you have a comment? Okay, let's move on then.
Yes, and to preface item number 8 and 9, frankly, not all of these were staff ideas. You can tell some of them were staff questions, but some of the members actually came to us verbally as well as in writing about potential options. This was one that a member brought forward and said, should we have performance and accountability agreements for the recipients of the funds?
Does someone want to, Mr. Co-Chair and then Representative Harrelson?
I would just say as much as possible. So whatever we can come up with for those and the department.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, we believe that the federal guidelines will require us in the quarterly reporting to facilitate those needs.
Okay.
And our established processes throughout the business practice in managing all this is we have very strong subrecipient monitoring, reporting. For example, we have a red light, yellow light, green light report. When we feel that we have a movement from green, really good activity, to yellow, we need to get involved. The Department of Health knows this. We get involved, we get it back to green. If we get red, then we hammer the brakes and everybody comes in and facilitates that. But I do believe that this will be an expectation of the federal reporting on a quarterly basis.
So perhaps we could put Director Richards that into the draft. Let's see what that looks like as far as accountability. And then after the committee looks at it, if we want to strengthen that, we can do that at that time. So with that concept in mind, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Thank you. Next.
And number 9, perhaps the department already includes in some of its subrecipient agreements, but should the state have the ability and expectation to claw back funds in case the recipient entities misuse the funds?
Pretty straightforward. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay.
Item number 10, you've already addressed,
Yep.
so I will discard that. And then item number 11, we have heard from other members of the committee that there may be some other items that we didn't think of. Wanted to give plenty of opportunity.
So at this time, any member, please make your comments known. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One idea, since this is focused on rural healthcare improvements, I believe we should have an amendment that allows for telehealth freedoms. And if a medical professional is licensed in their own jurisdiction outside of the state of Wyoming, they do not need to get additional licensing through the state of Wyoming. So that if being in border states and other things like that, a lot of individuals in my district, they drive down to Denver for medical visits, but they're not allowed to do telehealth with their doctors that aren't licensed in Wyoming. And so this would open up freedom to allow Wyoming citizens to see whatever provider they want.
Okay, so we can have some discussion on that. Representative Harrelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only question I would have is, does that roll in that single subject bill conversation, or is there enough of a diversion there that we might get a kickback? I don't know. That'd be my only question just to think about. But I mean, I definitely don't disagree with the concept. Just want to make sure that we don't derail something unintentionally.
Other discussion? Representative Sherwood, and then
Thank
just-
you. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I think just a clarifying conversation, was this envisioned to be part of that interim topic that Labor Health would take on and go through that process of broadening the across state lines licensures?
Okay, other comments, or was that a question or? Yes. Okay, and who was that directed to?
If the department can comment on that, I don't have your application in front of me and I apologize for that, but I know that it did call out a policy consideration around licensing.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Sherwood, you're right. Part of the state policy actions that the federal government included as potential actions in the RHTP program involved scope of practice and licensure, not specifically in this particular issue. So we did intend to bring that as an interim topic, what we've committed to the federal government to do, likely to the Labor Health Committee through the interim topic process that already exists. We could certainly add that. And Representative Smith, you bring up an issue that is certainly near and dear to our hearts. In our Medicaid program, we've expanded a lot of our telehealth policies to have parity, those types of things to facilitate it, but understand that it's still an issue. That particular legislative issue is much broader than rural health transformation in this program, given that it is about interstate licensure, compacts, scope of practice, et cetera. So it might just be bigger than this program. So a humble suggestion to maybe consider that both in and also outside of this particular effort. We could certainly entertain that as a part of the proposal as an interim topic.
Senator Guru?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, because I think it's a great idea, but I just don't want it to derail the program just because then we're doing something that's outside somebody's scope. So if we could get that was another goal through this process, I think that'd be great.
Yes.
But I hate to see it derail.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This may be a question for Department of Health. I've been in contact with a physician from my area on critical access hospitals. Another term that could be used is sole community hospital. Would that also be a part of that? Especially if they're the only one in a community.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Angelos, it's another really good question. So sole community status is a different designation for hospitals that might not meet critical access hospital standards. We did design the incentive program in what you see in the application, specifically around critical access hospitals for a few reasons. So it wouldn't directly apply. But certainly as part of this overall effort, all of our hospital designations, critical access, sole community, and what we call PPS or prospective payment system hospitals, which are larger, will benefit we believe in many ways from the program because of the kind of tertiary benefits of the improvements we're looking to make.
Okay,
Can I
yes,
have a follow-up? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So do we need to add that language at all into it, or do you feel confident that that will be included?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Angelos, I feel confident that we're okay with it as is.
Okay, so Representative Smith, what would you like to do? Do you want to go forward with this, or what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we could take a vote and maybe do it both ways, see what it would look like as an amendment in the bill here, and if it goes through, great. If it gets
So repeat your suggestion then for the committee.
basically a telehealth freedom and just deregulating the licensures to allow more telehealth access in Wyoming.
Okay. So all those in favor of that idea, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay. I think that carries. Did you get a vote count on that? Should we do it again?
I believe there was at least one member who did not vote.
Can you ask him to, could you get the absent member? Well, I'll tell you what, he's not here, so if he's not, so let me do a vote again on that. All those in favor of Representative Smith's idea, raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, if I can comment on how this will be effectuated, this will broaden the title a bit to relate to healthcare as the subject rather than just rural health transportation program funds.
Okay.
So that would open potentially the door for future amendments to other health
And
type
to
subjects.
mention that we're putting a draft bill together. What's next?
All of staff's items. If there's anything else, I'm happy to incorporate.
Was there any other committee member who had an idea besides that? Yes, Mr. Co-Chair.
I think I look at this whole rural health transformation program and funds, much like I look at CARES Act and ARPA and the way they came to the state, trying to make an impact temporarily, and hopefully long-term, but mostly it's temporarily expected to be funding from the federal government. We've already had the ARPA funds well managed by the Grants Management Office. And so in some capacity, I would like to have them in the draft bill involved with the decision-making and the reporting, and maybe it's that board. I don't know how it works, but if Director Hibbard could work with Director Richards and get some language in there and how we can incorporate that office with this whole process.
Mr. Co-Chair, I would completely agree with that. I think that at least for me, I believe that is appropriate, and it gives me a greater comfort level as well. Other members of the committee who have a feeling on this? So let's take a vote. All those who, yes, then Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like if Director Hibbard would be willing to kind of comment on that concept. That'd be awesome. I'm definitely all for it, but I just wanted to also kind of get his heart on that.
I guess I don't want to put the director in a untenable situation, given his position.
Then vote away.
Pardon me?
Then vote away. Let's vote.
Why don't we, yeah, I think with your leave, I'd like to just take a vote. So we have that in front of us. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Okay. Great.
Welcome back.
Yes. Okay. So
Say aye.
you'll read about it. Director Richards, what do we have remaining?
Mr. Chairman, I think we are back onto the agenda, and that disposes with the Rural Health Transformation Program topic. You have one call back this afternoon. It is the Wyoming Business Council, and the Executive Director, Josh Durrell, is present for any questions regarding the callback. To refresh the memory of the committee, I believe there was some interest in the Business Council's efforts with respect to regulatory revisions.
Okay. So please. I didn't ask for them. I'd like to get them in and out quickly. This is grand stuff. Whatever you want to do, John. Seems to me we've made our decision on first, but if you want to, if you want to relish the opportunity, then. How many days in court does it have? Welcome. Mr. Durrell, how are you? Good to see you here. Mr. Josh Durrell is the CEO of the Wyoming Business Council. And Mr. Durrell, please introduce yourselves and anyone that you'd like to bring up to the table. It's good to see you back here. And I know that there were some individuals on this committee that had some questions, but please first introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Josh Durrell. I'm the CEO of the Wyoming Business Council. And I appreciate the opportunity to come back and clarify some things. Thank you.
So, committee members, questions? Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because this side of the Business Council maybe is less familiar to the rest of us, I think the topic of regulatory reduction came up as we discussed callbacks. And I would greatly appreciate if the director could go through that process, maybe give us some examples in communities and how that regulatory reduction process has benefited our businesses. Thank you.
Mr. Durrell. And again, I will not refer to you as CEO. We've made that clear. So, Mr. Durrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Sherwood, thank you for the question on regulatory reduction. If I might just take a second to sort of help you understand why we care about regulatory reduction and where we've been working on that. A few years ago, I sat in front of the Appropriations Committee and we were talking about housing, and they said, well, why is housing a challenge? And I said, well, my job is to make housing worse, because my job is to help create the landscape where businesses can thrive and more people are going to need housing. And I think that by creating that demand, the supply will go up. But what we found is that supply and demand are not actually elastic in Wyoming, in most of our communities. And so we took a deep dive into that. We found out that the reason that is because there are other forces that were causing problems there, and regulatory burden was one of them. And we said, well, gosh, housing is a challenge for our employers and our businesses and families around the state. How do we help with that? And so we took a deep dive into regulations and arterial infrastructure. Those are the two biggest challenges that Wyoming communities faced. And so I got to eat those words, and then I got to begin working alongside some of the leadership in Laramie County as well as Albany County to really address some of the regulatory burden that developers and home builders were facing. And so we worked with the folks in Laramie County. Mayor Collins has done a fantastic job of looking at housing. And so we kind of came along inside work that he was doing to really dig down and show the effects of the regulatory burden, as well as help him see some of the best practices that are out there. And what we know is that when you can work on reducing that regulatory burden that businesses face when building homes or developing land, then you're going to make us more competitive and unlock that. So we've been working with the city of Cheyenne for a number of years, I believe since about 2023. And we've been working with Albany County since 2024 on a similar effort. In Cheyenne, the number of housing permits has gone up 2.6 times, so 260% over the last few years because of that, in part because of that regulatory burden reduction. So I think regulatory reduction is one of our key tenets. It's actually one of the 3 principles I wanted to talk with all of you about today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an inside track on this since I was on our local communities housing coalition. And I just want to reiterate the value of the staff at the Business Council, specifically in this instance, our regional director who facilitated all of these conversations. So a lot of times in a community where you have a problem and you're sitting at the kitchen table and you're like, man, why is housing such a problem? Why is XYZ such a problem? And you don't have somebody with the expertise to facilitate all of the decision makers getting in the room, sitting down with industry, sitting down with regulators, sitting down with those impacted, and really doing a deep dive into the problem, you can never move the needle on solving that problem. So I just wanted to share with the committee this example of it wasn't a big fancy grant that got us headed in the right direction. It was human capital, and it was the staff of the Business Council wrapping their arms around this problem with us and facilitating really thoughtful conversations. And Josh, if you want to speak to, what does that look like when your staff go out into communities and support local capacity building? I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Sherwood, I think local capacity is something that, again, is something that we look at as another key tenet. So if you think about regulatory reform, that is one of the things that we feel is a strong principle for us, reducing that regulatory barrier because it is a problem. The other part, and this is where we kind of catch a little flack for this in communities even, because we used to be the place where it was easy to get money from us. I'm not going to tell you it wasn't. In prior to 2020, we didn't say no very often. If it met the rules, we funded it. And in 2020, we stopped doing that. And instead, we instituted really more about local capacity and building partnerships with local communities, not just saying, here's some money that may fix your problem. Instead, we started to dig into the problems as they really were, and as we were 2 or 3 levels deep in the problem, and encourage communities to do that work beforehand. And so that is a key component of what we do. Is we believe that at the local level, there are people who are willing to work hard to create that landscape where businesses can thrive. And what we found is that just throwing money at the problem was not the right thing. And so what we have instituted are at least 2 programs that do that. Building state capabilities and assessment to action are 2 of them, but our team does that in really everything that they're doing. We go with capacity first, money maybe is sort of the way we look at it, because we don't want to go just throw money at a problem. And I think that local capacity piece is what's going to help our communities ultimately turn around and be able to solve their own problems. I think it's important to note that local capacity, it sometimes is money though. And we work with a community, and then they'll say, okay, this is the stumbling block. We say, okay, we feel economically you're right, and we feel like it's a barrier to growth that we can address. And then we can go in and strategically put money in. And I think that the example of that is Mesa in Evansville there near Casper, where we provided the water and sewer line to 160 or so acre business park. That to us is about building capacity, because we unlocked growth that then the community could have. And that business then came in and has invested, $100 million or so in that community now to build that out. So we see capacity as a huge piece of it. If you don't mind, I might also talk a little bit about the role of government. I think we have maybe rightly so, and we're definitely known as the place where we're probably sometimes in competition with businesses rather than complementary to businesses. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we actually have worked really hard to get out of areas where private businesses don't need us. And I'll give you 2 examples. We had a project that came before us back in 2023.
I want to make sure that Representative Sherwood had all her questions. Do you want to follow up anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have follow-ups, but this was in line with one of the questions I had in terms of that balance of the role of government, what the statutes say, and then what the Business Council is doing on the ground to make sure that we're not competing with the free market. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and Representative Sherwood, thank you as well. That is something that we look at as much as possible. Again, our goal is to create the landscape, not to be a major player, and to maybe fill gaps where there are gaps in the market. And in the case of a project in the middle of the state there, we had a project that came before us, and they said, look, in the past, you may have funded this type of a project that had equipment and all of that. And we said, well, we actually don't fund that type of stuff anymore because there are private solutions for that. There are businesses that are set up to fund equipment and to provide loans for equipment. We feel like that would be better suited by the private industry. And we didn't make a lot of friends with that denial, but we did make sure that we went in and clarified our rules to make sure that it was very clear to communities and businesses that if it's something that's covered by the private market, we're not going to provide that gap. And because it's not a gap in the market. And so that was one example. And then another example of that is in the banking world. We have a number of loan programs. In fact, we have about 102 loans that are still outstanding that we're working through. And in many cases, or most of those cases, the banks actually see us as a partner. I was talking with a gentleman at the Wyoming Banking Association, and he said, look, we don't see you as competition. We see you as a partner because the loans that we work on with you would never get done without you. Because as a bank, I have a certain level of comfort with and risk tolerance that I can make, and I can't make anything beyond that. But there are certain situations where the state, according to our statute, has given us the ability to make and partner with a bank and institution to do those kinds of loans. And so they don't see us as competition. They see us as complementary and allowing businesses that are in their communities to either be, to change hands and to make that work and so that business can continue to thrive rather than go on, or to be able to approach a new problem that they hadn't foreseen. And Representative Sherwood, could you list off some of the other things I wanted to mention? I just got the regulatory, the capacity, and the competition.
Thank you. I wonder if you could speak to, where economic development shows up in the Constitution and our statutes, and the quasi-governmental approach that you have to be flexible and address innovative problem solving as it shows up, and maybe the need to say some of what you have done is forward thinking, and that our cleanup or addressing of statutes haven't caught up with that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Sherwood, so yeah, throughout Article 16, we are listed. We have a number of places where economic development is guaranteed by the Constitution. I also know that, and again, I think this committee and this body understands that we operate on statutes that are developed in the legislature and in partnership, generally speaking, in partnership with the executive branch. But that is something that we take very seriously and we execute those statutory requirements. But I would also say that we're not beholden and think that those are the only way to sort of peel this orange. We feel like there needs to be a healthy amount of collaboration and a healthy amount of discussion about those statutes that we currently work under in order to make sure that they're executing the things the way the legislature would want. I do think there has been a lag. We have not been able to change statute for the time that I've been here. We recently have made one biennium ago, we suggested to this particular committee that we needed to broaden a particular program and provided the language for that. It was not picked up. And then we also asked the Joint Minerals Committee this year to change some requirements for the the match requirements for the Business Ready Communities program, so that we wanted to raise the match level across the board for our grant and loan programs to communities for that infrastructure, water, sewer infrastructure that is shared by the community. And that was voted down. It was not carried forward. And, you know, I can understand where they're coming from, but again, our position is that we want to build partnerships with communities and not provide handouts. And that was a mechanism that, as we had heard from the legislative intent and in discussions with legislators, in discussions with you know, leadership, it was like, hey, this is a problem, we should address it. And so we responded to that. We didn't make it through, but that doesn't stop us from wanting to do that, just that. I think, as I mentioned, the world has changed dramatically in the 6 years that I've been here, and our statutes haven't necessarily been able to keep up with that. And I think it does deserve a deep dive into it. The way we've approached you know, on one case, our statutory language is broad enough where we can operate and work on regulatory reduction and things like that. It's not so specific that we can't. So we have that flexibility, and our agency has rulemaking authority, as well as a board of directors that helps us make decisions and governs us. That group has been very aggressive, and we have been very aggressive about making changes to our rules in order to put things in place. So if we think about revenue recapture, which is a way for the state to recoup funds that we've used in the communities, those are rules that have been changed through our own rulemaking authority. When we look at those equipment changes that I mentioned, those were clarifications that we made, and the 25% match requirement, we put those things in rule because that's sort of like that's the operating system that we can use and we can control and change to address the need. We do believe that there is much room for improvement of our statutory framework. And I think it requires a deeper dive than we might get in 1 or 2 meetings in a year. And it may require much more than that to do that. Did that answer your question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm intrigued by an agency who is striving for betterment. And it's being self-driven from within, from your team, because they're boots on the ground in the community. So they're seeing what's not working and what is working in a way that we may, as legislators, not be aware of. And so thank you for that willingness to ask for an examination. And it's something I'm definitely interested in as an interim topic, to really do a deep dive into your statutes and figure out what is no longer serving our businesses and our communities, and where there's programs that we could align with our shared values to really build out strong communities and let the world know that we are absolutely open for business. So that said, could you speak to how the Wyoming Business Council is unique, maybe positioned a little differently than business councils in other states? And then speak to, I guess one of the questions I had is there a state without a economic development agency? Two-part question there. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, Representative Sherwood. So there are economic development agencies or departments of commerce in every state. There are some that are much more aggressive. There are some that are, whether they're red or they're blue, they're all pretty aggressive right now. We're all battling it out for businesses and for creating an economy that will continue on. So there's no one that doesn't have that right now. What we do know is that we have a slightly different approach to our economic development than other states because of our fiscal system and because of our Constitution. And I think that in a lot of ways, we've sort of done our best to compare it to others. We do face a deficit when we're working with businesses who are looking to relocate here, because the other states play a little bit different game than we do. Other states are willing to offer money directly for moving costs or for, obviously performance metrics that have to happen, but they're able to provide money directly to businesses and without adequate consideration, which in Wyoming, we utilize business business ready communities program in order to provide that infrastructure or to provide a shared resource that sort of opens up the community for business. And we've seen that in places like I mentioned with Mesa. That's a shared infrastructure that unlocked things. So Mesa said, hey, we want to stay here and we'll do that. We've seen it in places like Sheridan with the high-tech business park and the high-tech business park planning for the second expansion of that. That is shared infrastructure that allowed it. And then when one company, I think we're all pretty familiar with the gun company that ended up moving from California to Sheridan. That company was in a battle. We were in a battle with Idaho for that company. And when we talk with the gentleman who is the principal of that organization, he said, look, it's a business decision. They were offering us incentives, but they also have a tax structure that would ultimately recoup those incentives. You are offering us a very, you're offering us an attractive package to come here, but none of it is money directly to us. We have to utilize our own money to move and all of that. The other states provide that. And the challenge that we have is we can work through that, and it's a complicated process, but we can work through it with companies. But ultimately, they have a fiduciary responsibility, or they have a board of directors that they're beholden to, and that's a challenge for us. But if it's gone, we're not in the game, because that game is being played by 49 other states. And so, and again, in preparation for this, I began to talk with organizations that we have been talking with for a number of years, because these don't happen overnight. No one picks up the phone and says, hey, we're coming, be here tomorrow, and all of a sudden they're here. And so I was talking with a gentleman who has a manufacturing operation with about 100 people. I said, well, what would happen if we weren't able to sort of structure incentives to help you with this and to show that we're in comparison to Texas, for example, who we always compete with? And he's like, well, there's no way that our board of directors and our investors is going to go for it. They're just not. You have to be able to compete. And the way you compete is interesting and it's hard to explain, but you at least compete. And so we are in that competition. I don't want to say we should do it because everybody else is doing it, but I think what happens is that if you're not in the game at all, you're not in the game. Like, you don't have a shot. You don't call these folks up and just because they want to, they move. They just don't do that. And so I think that it's a valid point to understand that we are in competition. And I want to offer a flip to that we don't think about often. And that is, those 49 other states are looking at our businesses as targets. And many of our companies that have gone through the process and built and commercialized and developed are being attracted other places. I know of two, I won't mention them, that have started operations on the Front Range, and we're doing everything we can to keep their people here and keep them growing here, because that could be a giant hole of hundreds of employees for Wyoming. And I don't want to see that. I don't want to see families have to move there. I don't think Wyoming families want to. And so I think it's it's something that we have to consider. It is, again, a consideration that we need to make and we need to be thoughtful about. But ultimately, when it comes to the statutes, we'll execute the statutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate the time and the conversation. I realize, and I'm hoping that you also have additional questions for the Business Council, but just to reiterate, I am very interested in sort of doing that performance audit of the existing statutes, working alongside the Business Council and the staff throughout the interim to really dig in and say, how can we structure our resources to make sure that we're targeting the problems, whether that's regulatory reduction, local capacity building, whether that's the out-migration of our youth that we see, and then our businesses struggling to attract workforce. How do we set up the state of Wyoming to be not like any other state, but to be the best version of ourselves and to control our own destiny? Because if we're not, to use your phrase, in the game, it's happening to us without our business leaders at the table. And the last thing I want is for, Laramie to become just like Fort Collins. I want to control our own destiny. So Laramie can be the best version of Laramie and Wyoming can be the best version of Wyoming. And I don't believe that we can do that without your support and assistance and your team as well. So thank you. Thanks for entertaining my questions. Appreciate the dialogue.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Mr. Durrell, what I've heard is what I would describe as a self-licking ice cream cone. And by that, I mean that you're describing a situation where businesses only will operate if government makes a way for them. And then government has to entice them to stay or keep making a way. And I don't think that's the way free markets were ever intended to work. My belief is the government has a responsibility to keep taxes and regulations low. That's it. And that makes an environment where businesses can flourish. And so far it's worked pretty well in Wyoming. You stated in your last visit with us that to be successful, you would need about $1 billion. Well, we're working on an entire budget for the state. We're looking at what the state's responsibilities are. And I just heard today from our Water Development Committee that they need $1 billion to take care of water infrastructure. And that's a proper role of government. You know, you came asking for 110 million and the governor gave you 54. Well, 54 million would allow us to get people off a DD waiver list and pay those providers a better wage to take care of people who can't take care of themselves. So I'm in a dilemma, you know, do I want to continue spending money to try to keep us from sliding down this GDP slope? Or do I want to do government right? Do I want to right-size government for the amount of people that are here and make it work for the people that are here and take care of the people that are here? And so with that having been said, I think we're at an impasse. There are some people that believe that this methodology is the right way. I think it creates a self-licking ice cream cone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. And Mr. Co-Chair, I think you're discussing a topic that's worthy of discussion. Like that is absolutely the challenge that we face. And while I think that the challenge to say that it's to use your I don't know if it's a metaphor or simile, but it's a self-licking ice cream cone. I don't know if that's really what we're saying. What we invest in are shared infrastructure in a community, things that are owned by the community. And the other programs that we have where you might be thought of as picking winners and losers and propping up businesses, we're either matching federal innovation dollars, which in places like, you know, up in Upton, we may need to be able to utilize that to help us extract the rare earths that are up there. We may need to do that in other places in the state. We may need that to open up new businesses that are addressing our Department of War's challenges that are out there. Those are programs that we have. We're not creating a self-licking ice cream cone where we're propping businesses up. We're finding the right role and we're willing to leave if we're not the right role. And I think that's an important distinction. We're not. I can see the ideology of, oh, wow, well, we're just creating this place where people can't sustain themselves and they need a handout. That's not what we're creating at all. In fact, if you look at the rule changes that we've made and the statutory changes that we've requested, they are actually for self-reliance. So what we are doing is in line in a lot of ways with what you're saying. And those are all of the controls that we have. And when we come and ask for more match so that it isn't a handout, we are told no. So I don't agree with you that we're creating a self-licking ice cream cone. I would submit that we are actually trying to create self-reliance and build capacity at our local level so that they could create the landscape where businesses can thrive. That is what we do. And I think that at the end of it, you got to remember that there's families that are in those businesses and they all want to share and have the opportunities in Wyoming. The challenge too is that this idea that we're sort of saying you shouldn't do the other things in the budget and you should only do our stuff. I'm going to apologize right now for saying $1 billion and making you think I've got to have that right now. I was addressing the need and the problem that we had and the price tag over time that it will be. What I do believe is that we're not making choices between one or the other. I believe that there's a way for us to navigate our $54 million ask, or perhaps even less, to do that. Navigate that through the budget. At the same time, you're making those hard choices. I would guess that there was a bit of a surplus in between what the governor's budget was and the money that was available and has to be put into savings. But that is your dilemma, and I appreciate that you're taking that on. I just don't think it's an either or proposition. I think it is a yes, we have an agency who's willing to look at the proper role of government and very willing to not defend our programs or to defend the efforts that we've taken so far, but rather seek the problem and address it with the right statutes and the right investment mechanisms. That's what you have in front of you, is that agency who's willing to do that. In my mind, it's not an either or, let's throw one away and only do this. It's more about how can we make this work? How can we work together to create the statutory framework that is palatable and addresses the problem? And I think you've got 40 people who want to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a few questions, but you just mentioned the dreaded phrase picking winners and losers. Last time you were here, I mentioned a metal fabrication business in Sheridan, which received a cash award from you. I know of another small cosmetics business in Jackson, received $2 million. I would suggest that that's not competition versus the free market. It's flat out interference. Your reaction when I mentioned the metal fabricators, will give me the names of the others and we'll send them a check too. What are you going to do? Send a check to everybody? So I'll leave that there and you'll have an opportunity to respond. But you did in many of the conversations that we've had, and thank you for being always available. You did mention that you were pivoting from that sort of action to more community infrastructure, trying to community readiness, that sort of thing. Do any of those projects involve a water project?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, I'll answer your second question first. Many of them do. I believe in a report that we provided to the Management Audit Committee I'm trying to remember when it was, but a few months ago, it lays out the lineal feet of water infrastructure that we have helped with that may or may not be part of the programs that you're talking about for other agencies might be able to have. If there's an opportunity to collaborate with them, we're all in. So we do infrastructure for that. In terms of pivoting, we have a number of programs. We have a number of programs that we utilize. The economy is not just one thing, it is many things, and we work on those gaps in the economy. So I would love to know the specifics of those two examples, because then I could walk you through those. However, I also want to correct you. I did not say we will send them a check. What I said was our programs are available to the people of Wyoming, and if they choose to engage with those programs, we will consider them. I think that's a very important component, and I would never say I would send them a check.
Okay, thank you. It's a fine point, but it actually makes my case in that eventually your agency then selects who receives that money, picking a winner and a loser. By whatever standards you have, justified or not, effectively you become the one that is the arbiter. And therefore you've just made my point. Thank you for doing that. Can you cite or describe for us any cooperative efforts between the Wyoming Business Council and the aforementioned Wyoming Water Development Commission?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, I'm gonna go back to winners and losers at my own peril here. Actually, yes, we do. We make selections. We make discernment. We help people understand their businesses better, and sometimes we pick them. Absolutely. I'm not going to back away from that. I do have a problem calling businesses in Wyoming losers, and I have a problem calling communities in Wyoming's losers. I don't believe that that's acceptable because I don't think any of them are losers. I think that they all learn something in the process. And so I do think we sometimes select companies. If that is a winner to you, that's great, but I will not use the term loser. On your other question about the Water Resource Commission, we're happy to work with them. In many cases, those funds are utilized for other things in our state, not necessarily municipal water lines and sewer lines. If they are, we're happy to either step out of the way, or we're happy to partner with them, or we're happy to demonstrate the need and where those lines are. I'm happy to do that. But I do not have that exact difference right now. I can tell you that the communities that are doing projects are inside their cities are likely not utilizing those funds, but I would be speaking out of turn to say that 100%.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we can't particularly cite one at present. That's fine, neither here nor there, just making sure that we're on the same page there. I've gotten a number of letters from people encouraging me, and I would presume that my comrades up here have gotten the same letters. I have not verified every single one of them, but many of them are from people who have received funds from the Wyoming Business Council. You have had an ongoing campaign for some time, and I forget what you call it, but information campaign, a campaign to get people involved and to stand up for what they're doing. And certainly you have every right to do such a thing. My question comes down is where in your mind, because you've done a lot of travel. I've seen you many places, just in Natrona County the other day. My question then comes to who's footing the bill for that? And how do you, in your mind, say, this is part of my job as CEO of this, and this is maybe a campaign to try to preserve the way that I think things should go. So if you would just touch on that for me, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Pendergraft. So I was in Natrona County yesterday virtually, speaking to their county commission about the economics and what they see as challenges that they face. But I was in Cheyenne through the ether to Natrona County, also Crook, and I happened to be in Laramie County, so I was in person at the county commission yesterday. And again, our job is to understand what's going on the ground. Our job is to enlist people to work on their economy. That is what we do, because it turns out that in our state, we do not have the resources in order for just those folks who are wearing many hats at the municipal and county levels to do it on their own, to understand a project, to understand the economics. To do all of that is going to take more than just us and just them. And so enlisting a group of people to understand the economy and work on the economy together is actually part of my job. Absolutely. Because I don't believe that 40 people is going to make the entire state the way it is. However, I do believe in the potential of our communities and of the people in our communities. And I believe that they have every right to understand the situation and work on it in their own way. So I do believe my travel around the state is funded by the general fund. It's funded in our budget. You'll see it. I'm happy to discuss those trips and where I've been and where I haven't been. And when I utilize technology to do that, I'm happy to talk about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for being here. I watched you last night in Natrona County. A little bit ago, you credited the Wyoming Business Council with 200% more housing permits here in Cheyenne through regulation reductions. What were those regulation reductions that gave us 200% housing, and what was your involvement in the reduction of them?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Alamand, no, I didn't credit the Wyoming Business Council with that. I said that we were working closely with the mayor, who has been working on that task force since March of 2021. It takes an awful long time to do all of those things. Regulatory reduction is one of those elements that he is utilizing. And what we have done is we have provided the analysis, the study of best practices, and the understanding of the current regulatory situation in Cheyenne and Laramie County to make suggestions, things like lot size, things like setbacks, things like facades. All of those elements cause developers to have to pay more and maybe not develop at all, and they cause home prices to go up, maybe unnecessarily. And again, what we've worked to do is present that information to the mayor so that he can work with his council to make those regulatory changes that are required to do that. We are definitely not taking credit. In fact, I'm a little better at taking blame, I think, than credit, because the way I look at it is he is doing the hard work politically. He's doing the hard work with his citizenry, and he is doing the hard work to get his council and his community to do those changes. We are providing facilitation, information, and ways that he might be able to go about that. I think we're providing a little bit of structure and backbone in some cases to say this is possible, and he has, but he's done the hard work. I can't take credit for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you presented reductions. What of these reductions did he put into place that you put forward?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Alamand, so those would be things like minimum lot sizes, auxiliary dwelling units. They would be setbacks. They would be the spacing between homes. They would be facade regulations. All of those are changes that we discussed with him. Mostly around zoning and things like that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And these changes were made. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Alamand, many of them were. I think that they're still working through some of them. Most of those changes don't just fly through. They require a lot of work to change. So yes, sir. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Josh, thanks for coming out today and having this conversation. So, I mean, I think that we've used that winner loser conversation and it kind of is a place marker for this discussion of the private partner, public partner conversation that I think is concerning. That is the concern. Talking about regulation, yeah, we need to reduce regulation. I don't think anyone in the room would disagree with that. I think that when the government gets too big, bad things happen, right? I think that municipalities need infrastructure updates. So talk to me a little bit about what I look at. I look at the budget. I look at kind of some of the statements you made. We need this much money to make this reality. I look at, we have SLIB. We've got vehicles and avenues there. And so do we want to create a landscape that's good for businesses? Yeah, absolutely. I think all of us do. I don't think anyone on this board doesn't. But I think the question that we're really concerned about is how do we get to that end goal? And what's the best vehicles? And are there vehicles that are already in place that financially make more sense? We had a task force with legislative task force for regulatory reduction. Does that make more sense? So just kind of talk a little bit about that, because I guess that is the struggle. And you and I have talked about this. That's the struggle that I'm up against.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, Representative Haraldson, yeah, the struggle is real. That is the challenge. What I will tell you is we we have become a pretty agile and problem-focused organization. We're not a product-focused organization. So the idea that we're 100% beholden to these programs and I will defend them till the end is that, I'm going to tell you right now, that's not true. We believe that we have to figure out the way to solve that. We have shown through things where we've changed our rules and we've changed the requirements so that we don't compete with business, so that we are playing the right role. We're not perfect, far from it. However, I think what you're saying is let's take a deep dive. Let's look at some of these. There are programs. I'll use the Small Business Innovation Research as an example. It's in the budget as SBIR. That is a program that we match federal innovation dollars that small businesses in Wyoming utilize when they're coming up with a novel concept. That's research dollars. It's not commercialization. It's not something that their next door neighbor is working on in the same business. And we utilize those funds to help them get to commercialization. We have in Wyoming, and I think this speaks to the Wyoming business people and the Wyoming entrepreneurs, that we have much better metrics than anywhere else in the nation on business success over time. And again, it goes back to our grit. It goes back to who we are as people. We're going to figure it out. But that innovation is not going to happen with their own investment. It's not going to happen without that extra investment. Now, is that palatable to the legislature? And does it solve a problem that is worthy of solving? I think that's worthy of a discussion. I can tell you how successful those businesses are and how many employees that they've grown to and all of that. They're not competing with other businesses that are next door. They're competing against businesses that maybe are in other states, or they're not competing at all. They're creating. And so I think that's in our budget. You'll see it in our regular budget and in our exception budget is $5 million in the standard and $5 million in the exception budget, because we want to, and I think our at the federal level, there's a lot of focus on innovation, and there's a lot of focus on innovation that matters to Wyoming. So should that program be considered something where we're picking winners and losers? I don't know. Could we work that through and work with you to understand it and say, we like this, we don't like this, we're going to change it? We're game. But what we know is that there are opportunities there that we want Wyomingites to have. Now, I'm very, I think, eager to dive into business-ready communities. It is absolutely in need of statutory clarification. It's in need of statutory changes. It is absolutely in need of a reset. I think that we are best suited to do that. We have a lot of ideas. We have ways to do it. I'm more than happy to engage with members of municipality leadership, with economic development organization leadership, with members of the legislature who understand and want to figure this out with me. We definitely want to do that because, again, I'm not defending these programs. I want to make them right, and I want to make them work for Wyoming. And I think what you're asking is, could we, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're saying, can we take these things that everybody sees as picking winners and losers and either make them so they don't do that or clarify them so that everyone understands what they do? And man, I'm raising my hand. I'm first in line on that.
One more follow-up. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think infrastructure upward, that landscape is a completely different conversation than the other side of there's a machine shop or there's something like that. Those are two different conversations, right? Yep. The other thing that I think, and I guess my question would be, have you done that? Have you sat down and worked with municipalities? Have you gotten legislation moving forward to try fix these things? Because I'm going to hit you with this. How you've occurred to me is the fact that no, business as usual. Wait a second, there's conflict. I'm going to pivot. And that's kind of how it feels. Yeah. And I know that leaves a bad taste. Yeah. And so I want to get some clarity. Have we had that track record of saying, let's talk to municipalities and legislators and economic development and figure out how this balances out? Or is it a deal where it's like, no, full steam ahead, we're going to continue on path, but then this is what we get?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harrelson, I'm glad you asked that way, because that's what it looks like. But what I can tell you is that, and I wish I had developed the DeLorean with the flux capacitor and went back to the future and changed this stuff from December 4th until this day. That would be a magical thing. And I think state revenue would be in good shape, would be great. Okay. But it's not like that. In the last 4 weeks or 5 weeks, we have gathered the information, but actually it was all here. If you look at our board meetings, we have changed rules to clarify things and get us out of instances where we're competing. We have, and I will say, if you think you're upset with us about picking winners and losers, you should talk to communities who are a little bit upset with us that we keep asking them to put more skin in the game and do more analysis before throwing money at a problem. In 2019, it was pretty easy to get money from the Business Council. In 2026, it's going to get even harder than it was in 2025. And trust me, you'll probably hear from some people in municipalities on Friday during public comment who say, yeah, I like these things about the Business Council, but darn it, they're really making us work hard to get that. So it's not something that I've developed since December 4th. This is something that we've been working on since March of 2020. When we worked to do all of those business relief programs that were put forth by the legislature, at the exact same time, we were creating change within our organization, and we said no to half of the projects that came before us for 2 years. Again, I'm not that popular, right? I'm not that popular for this committee. I'm not that popular for a lot of municipalities because we're creating that change. We believe that change is required or we're going to get the same thing. So starting in 2020, we did that. We've continued to do that work. We have rules that are in front of our board to change it again. Again, we are continuing to do that. We put forth statutory changes in July with the Minerals Committee, and those didn't move forward. We put a suggestion before joint appropriations 2 years ago. We clarified our rules in 2023 to make sure that we were not competing with private business. Those are all elements that, again, I wish I could have said, oh, on December 5th, I took my Wayback Machine and went back there and did it. But instead, we've been doing that all along. And that's why I know that things look a little bleak for us right now, but I'm more excited than I've ever been. And I'll tell you why. Because there's a lot of attention right here. There's a lot of focus right here where it needs to be on these programs and on these investments and on the policies. I'm more bullish on what we can do for the state right now, even though from the outside world, it looks like that sounds crazy. I'm really excited about the focus. I believe what we're all saying is we want to take a deep dive and fix this so that it works better. And I can't, except for our track record over the last 6 years, I can't describe it any better than that. And I hope it answers your question. But again, we haven't gone back in time to change those. Those are things that we were doing all along. We just maybe need to communicate a little bit better.
Other questions from the committee? I want to give you every opportunity, Mr. So, if you have a closing statement, please do.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And you're right. You have absolutely, and this committee in calling us back has given us ample opportunity to clarify. I think when I came with the problem and the price tag, I missed the mark a little bit back in December. And I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to clarify our principles, clarify that we're not really defending our programs, we're trying to change them. And we know that we need your help to do it. And I do want to talk about people for just a second. As long as I've got this alliteration going, I'll go ahead and go with people here. We have 40 people at the Business Council that are absolutely 100% on board for Wyoming. And they are not just here to protect their programs or do the same thing they did yesterday. They're here to create that change. And we know that with the tools we have today, we're not going to be able to do it. But we also know that we're willing to work with the legislature. And those 40 people want, more than anything, to work on this problem with you. Because we believe that Wyoming is the place where we can have a really strong economy. It is the place where we can control our destiny. And I think the other part, and I believe that this occurs. I'm not trying to say that it doesn't occur in other places, but I really believe that I'm more excited right now, even though things look bleak, than I've ever been about the Business Council and the legislature working together to create the right statutes, to create the right programs, or no programs at all. Whatever those operating systems are, to make sure that again, Wyoming families have an opportunity. And I think if we work together and carefully examine things, and we're open with you and you're open with us, I think it's a model for other agencies and other places around the state to say, hey, we can do that. We can work together. It's not adversarial. And I think, again, we've been about change for the last 6 years. We've built an organization that can and will continue to change. We just want help so that we can change faster. And I think that we're having the right conversation, and I appreciate the opportunity to come back and have it. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Committee, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, that concludes your scheduled agencies and callbacks for the day.
Okay, then we are, so tomorrow at 8 a.m.